Greetings, YouTube. Today I'm going to be doing a book review on a book by Everson, The Art of W.C. Fields. And it's very boring, and this has kind of cracked me up. I don't know if you can see that, but it says $150. This is not worth $150, even if it had the dust jacket, because I checked online, it's worth about $3. By William Everson, and I believe this was printed in '67. And one of the reasons I want to do a book review like this is because you get to see some of the actual images of Fields himself. Now, the author is an unabashed W.C. Fields fan. He, in fact, considers W.C. Fields to be the greatest comedian that's ever lived. The one thing I learned in this, and first of all I realized that I'd never actually seen a full W.C. Fields film. I've seen clips before, so I know his work and his style, but I've never seen a full film. I have to do that. But one thing I learned, he's a juggler, or was a juggler. I didn't know that. Now, one of the things I enjoyed about this is there were lots of wonderful pictures, and back at this time, if he was doing silent films, he had this really silly mustache. I think it was a holdover from his vaudeville days, but frankly, it was just horrible. And everyone, including the author, thought it was equally bad. But he eventually did away with it. But here you see him doing a con man bit with a little bit of the shell game, the classic shell game. And here I see, in this particular film, he was actually playing a father figure. Now, Fields was interesting in that he had multiple careers, because he was a vaudevillian. Well, that mustache is a little less obnoxious. He was a vaudevillian who got into it completely on his own. He didn't come from a background of show business. He ran away from home at 11 because his family was horrible. He got the classic nose as a childhood injury from being beaten by his father. Though he was an alcoholic, don't get me wrong. And here we have more black and white stills. I also learned that a lot of his early films are gone. Just gone. There's no copies of them left at all. Which is horrible that we have let our film history just slip through our fingers, or in this case, rot in their canisters. Here we have W.C. Fields with a child, and famously, he hated children. Now, as he aged, that mellowed, but he was never a fan of children and of animals. And while he may not have been as prejudiced and bigoted as was the norm in the era he was practicing his craft in, he still wasn't always the nicest guy. He had some very negative views about minorities, although it is said that he actually kicked someone out of his home for making fun of for being racist towards a black servant. It was in his employment. But he gave alcohol to a child so that the kid would be drunk, and then he'd get the kid kicked off the set because he was being unprofessional. That's not the mark of an enlightened man. But then again, it wasn't much different era. He had numerous routines that had come out of his vaudeville acts that he then put into his early silent films, and he also tried to shoehorn them into his talkies. Now here again, he's still looking at the mustache, though it's a little less obnoxious in that one. But eventually, he does forego the mustache in this particular case. He's gotten rid of it. But I just love some of these stills. It's just these huge, lavish sets. Here he's playing the president of a nation of expert athletes, and he's actually supposed to be picking up this 600-pound weight, which is kind of funny. But he was a man that very much knew what he wanted in his films, and was, if he had a director that would let him do it, he would be very, very funny. And I've seen some of his things, and he has been funny, but he has also had directors that didn't want to allow him to do his thing. For example, comedy has a beat. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Boom! That's how comedy works. You have to have that beat so that you can have the punchline. And he had one particular director that when he's trying to do that beat, this director kept cutting to other parts of the film. Now, narratively, it may have made some level of sense, and it was this particular director's artistic style. But when you're doing some comedy, and someone keeps breaking up your rhythm, you're not going to be that funny. And there was, of course, some sexism. That was fairly common. W.C. Fields as a dentist, which is very funny, and a dental assistant in the classic white nursing hat, which I actually can remember the white nursing hat from when I was a kid. There were some other pictures in here. Sorry. Whoop. Here we have him on a bicycle, and he loved his craft, and he was very particular about his craft. And as he aged, he couldn't do his craft the way he wanted to. And it's particularly in the last few years of his life, like in 45, he just couldn't juggle the way he used to. And while he still tried to get gigs as an actor, his health was deteriorating in a very, very poor, severe way, I should say. He playing in a film, David Copperfield. He actually did historical style film, which is kind of amazing. And then there's the classic top hat, which is kind of the image I always have in my head of W.C. Fields. Now, in his later years, he put more weight on, and oddly, that's him kissing his daughter in this particular film. He playing a wealthy man, trying to convince not to wear his pith helmet in public, that the top hat would look better. But here is W.C. Fields in the last years of his life with an unretouched photograph. And you see him as the man he was. Old, sick, alcoholic. He was a great comedian. And he left us some great comedy. And he influenced Warner Brother cartoons in particular, but many other forms of comedy. And I really need to get myself a collection of his work so I can look at it start to finish, for at least as much as it's available. But he was human, and he wasn't perfect. And if you can see past the author's love affair with W.C. Fields, there's a lot of good information in here. And I really enjoyed the book, though his style was a little difficult to read at times. He had more good information and then he had great writing style. He was a fan first and an author second, let's put it that way. But I enjoyed the book, and I'm going to pass it on to my father, who was a fan of black and white films. So this has been The Art of W.C. Fields.